member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Normally, there would not be much debate in the House when we talk about making updates to a Broadcasting Act that came into effect in 1991. At face value, most Canadians would say that a lot has changed since then. A little thing called the internet came along, and again, most would agree. I've talked about this topic in the House before, and I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm pretty sure I was the first MP in Canadian history to put boys to men in the parliamentary record when talking about the legislation before us, because back in 1991, times have changed a little bit. Boys to men, Bryan Adams, MC Hammer, and Monty Python were on the charts. I want to put that back on the record again. I'm glad I've done that. The goals of the Broadcasting Act have been reasonable, respecting official languages and providing an avenue for Canadian content on traditional media at the time of TV and radio. But here's the thing I've said in the House, sadly, on many issues over and over again. Only the NDP and the Liberals working together can they take something so mundane and so innocuous and make a disaster out of it when it comes to policy. And here's how I know that, Madam Speaker, because outside of the Ottawa bubble, there aren't too many Canadians that know what C-4 or S-252 or C-39 is when it comes to government legislation. You know the government is in trouble. You know when they were on the wrong side of public opinion when a bill title becomes famous. Last couple of weeks, couple of months, C-21 has become synonymous with an attack on rural Canadians, Indigenous communities, and hunters when they tried to ban commonly used hunting rifles. And here we are now with the famous term C-11, known by millions of Canadians across the country today as the most blatant attempt by the Liberals and NDP and bureaucrats in Ottawa to have control over what you see and what you search on the internet. And Madam Speaker, if that wasn't enough convincing by talking about C-11 being a household name to millions of Canadians, you know you're in trouble when Conservatives and Margaret Atwood are on the same page pushing back against the government. A wonderful Canadian, I will say, and one of the most regarded and successful Canadian artists and content creators this country has ever seen. But don't take my word for it. Don't take maybe Bernie from this side of the bench if you don't want to. Canadians will take Margaret Atwood's word on Canadian culture and content any day of the week over the Liberals and the NDP. I want to use the dictionary version of what she said. She's had some pretty harsh things calling out the government on C-11. When you break it down and use the dictionary to further define what she's calling this government out for, it is creating a centralized and dictator-like system of control that requires complete subservience to the state. This is bad legislation. They know it. It's been ping-ponged back and forth between the House of Commons to the Senate, back to the House of Commons, it's going to go back to the Senate. Every time there's a committee hearing, every time there's more witnesses testifying, there become more questions and answers about what the government is doing here with this bill. From consumer groups to legal experts to content creators, many, many groups from every walk of life and every angle on this topic are calling out the government's direction and how bad and how flawed this bill is. I'm proud to stand as a Conservative to say, when we form government, we will repeal Bill C-11. We will kill Bill C-11, simple as that. Now let's get into the weeds and talk about some of these pieces bit by bit. One of the things you hear the Liberals and NDP say is we need to support Canadian content more. And so when I think about that, I'd pull up a list and say, sure, let's support Canadian content here. Things like Deadpool. It was filmed in Vancouver, starring Canadian actor Ryan Reynolds, screenplay by Canadian Paul Wernick, based on a Canadian comic book character. You've got Canadian Bacon, who can forget that? John Candy, a legendary Canadian actor, on a story involving Canada. I talked about Margaret Atwood. Do you think The Handmaid's Tale, based on her book? Filming of the series, when you look at the production, Mississauga, Toronto, Brantford, Hamilton, Burlington, Oakville, Cambridge. And I think of Canadian content like the All or Nothing series on the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was a 5-part series that followed the Leafs for months during the 2020-2021 season. It was narrated by a Canadian, Will Arnett, and it used Canadian cruise, Canadian content, right? Nope. Every one of those examples I just cited does not meet the definition and criteria for Canadian content in the definitions that we have. C-11 is currently 56 pages long, and any Canadian go online, look at it, they can hit Control-F and search. Nowhere in there do they talk about modernizing and cleaning up that definition. Nowhere in it. Because, Madam Speaker, I will argue this is not about Canadian content. This is about something else. Every time we put an amendment forward to clarify, if the government wants to debunk a myth saying what we're saying is not the case, clarify it. Put in amendments to say what it is not, to exclude certain things. They refused to do so. They say, don't worry, we're not going to determine that. It's going to be the CRTC. Which brings me to my next point. Another fundamentally flawed part of this legislation. The CRTC is an Ottawa-based acronym. Federal acronyms go left, right, and center around here. They are an agency in Ottawa and on the Quebec side as well, in the National Capital Region, full of bureaucrats who behind closed doors will set the rules on what is not just necessarily Canadian content, but they are also through this bill being directed to start controlling the search results that you have on the internet. You heard that right about behind closed doors. We've asked repeatedly to put some sunshine on this, some sunlight on it, some transparency on those protocols. There's no criteria in this bill. There's no public formula. There's no clarifications or guardrails on what they are. So for Canadians, when it comes to what they search and what they want to see, whether it's searching on Google or Crave or YouTube or any other platform, as a Canadian here now, the government will control what goes up in search results, what goes down, and you will not be able to find out the algorithms and calculations they use because of CRTC bureaucrats doing it behind closed doors. They never have to share their reasoning, or I call showing their homework. It speaks volumes. Now, the Prime Minister and the NDP will say, well, don't worry, an arm's-length agency of the federal government. They're independent, they say. Let's just debunk that right now. The CRTC reports to the Liberal Minister of Canadian Heritage. Its chair and the commissioners that are on there working, leading that organization, are appointed directly by the Prime Minister and the Liberal cabinet. Nobody believes that it is arm's length, and nobody believes this is about Canadian artists and everyday Canadians. Because if it was the right thing to do, it was the popular thing to do, and there was no problems about it, they would put that whole process and make it a lot more public than punting it over behind closed doors. This bill is not about sunlight. It's not about Canadian artists and content creators. I say, Madam Speaker, this bill is a Trojan horse because there are some very big cheerleaders for this bill. The bureaucracy at the CRTC is going to be exploding in size. The size of the internet is massive. The amount of content uploaded every single day is huge. It is going to take an administrative swarm of new bureaucrats to go through. And the people that are going to hit jackpot, the people that are doing cartwheels in downtown Ottawa, are the lobbyists that are now going to be hired by all these groups and associations and artists to try to lobby to get them when they go behind closed doors to take what is going on. As I share my time with the member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, we will continue the commentary on this and how it works. Because if you are a budding content creator in North Winnipeg or a Franco-Ontarian or an Indigenous artist in Northern Canada, say in Nunavut, you can currently upload and may the best content win. Right. The cream of the crop rises. Canadians will determine what they like and what they want to watch, and that should be the most popular search results, the most organic way possible. So trust me, the best way is let Canadians do their own work. Let the organic way go. Good videos go to the top. Canadian content, we have thousands of artists that have made a living, that have created content and continue to do so. We don't need to fix what is not broken. Madam Speaker, I will wrap up by saying C-11 is bad. It is online censorship. Ottawa telling 37 million Canadians what they should watch and see is wrong. The Liberals and NDP have had years to get this right, and now they're just being stubborn. I look forward to saying under a Conservative government, we oppose this bill now, and in a Conservative government we will kill Bill C-11. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, first and foremost, the member makes reference to Liberal and NDP. It's the Liberal members of the House of Commons, the Bloc members of the House of Commons, the NDP members, and the Green Party members. It's only the Conservative Party that's spreading misinformation that's out there. The member stood in his place, Madam Speaker, and tried to give a false impression. Tried to say that as if the government's trying to control what Canadians are watching. In no way whatsoever can the member cite anything that is within this legislation that would prevent a Canadian from watching whatever he or she wants to watch on the internet. There's nothing that's there. But you'd think that would stop? The motivating factor for the Conservative Party on C-11 is purely finances in feeding a frenzy of individuals that they want support from, Madam Speaker. I say shame on the Conservative Party for not protecting cultural industries and the arts in Canada.
Member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
My colleague spends a lot of time in the House. I'd encourage him on this piece of legislation to read Clause 7. That is the exact reason why we have major concerns and calling out this bill as flawed. They have had so many opportunities in the House of Commons, in the Senate, and back here in committee through amendments to do this. But the reality of the situation is true. They are punting the power to the CRTC behind closed doors to create algorithms on what goes up in searches and what goes down. That is control. That is censoring something if it's organic and what people want to watch and they don't like it. They could put a formula in and make a company have it go down. And if they have these big lobbyists that advocate to tweak that formula, all of a sudden search results can go up. It wasn't a problem until C-11 came along and the government's intent. They've had every opportunity to clarify. They refused.